What if I told you that we have between 150 and 200 library books for my kids in our home at any given time? Would you wonder how I do that? And more importantly, why? Stay tuned. Krista here with Mom's Fine Truth. Who here likes the idea of teaching your child a love of reading? Also, reading aloud to them throughout the day and expanding their worldview by directing them to really good books. But where do we start with these grand ideas? Well, that's why I'm here today, because the place to start is the library, the world of book magic and wonder. Now, in an effort to create an excitement around going to the library, I started finding ways to make it a legit outing, not just a stop in, grab a couple books and head out again, but a legit outing that they're excited about. So I researched libraries in the area and found out when their story times are, because if you're not familiar, most libraries do have story times, usually different ones for different ages, but siblings are allowed to come. So it's not a restriction, it's more of a identification as to what level of books they'll be reading and what level the story time will be most appealing to. So try to find one that fits the ages that your children are as best as you can. So all of y'all can go together. So we always go to the library on a day with a story time. We start off by going to the story time. Some of them have an open play time, some of them don't. And then they all have a kids area. And that can be, maybe a few things to play with. One of our libraries has like an indoor tree house they can go sit and read in. It looks different for every library, but that's the area also with the kids' books. And so doing the story time, sometimes the open play time, and then enjoying the book area is the outing of the library. And it started off, the story time was about 30 minutes and we'd maybe stay 30 more. But the more my kids have learned that love of reading just by experiencing the excitement of books and becoming more comfortable with picking out books and what books they like and don't like, etc., the longer that outing has become. Now we'll be there 2+ hours and they'll still express disappointment when I say it's time to go so we can have lunch or whatever's next. So once you've researched the libraries in your area and found out what the different resources are, and you can just start trying them out, see where the best story times are, see where the best play areas are within the kids' book section. Honestly, see where the best kids sections are, because some libraries don't have a lot of options for kids' books. So it's just a time to explore, and each one is a new and exciting outing. Now, next is it's the big one. I'm not going to try to downplay it, especially if you're not super confident with selecting books for your kids. This can be the intimidating step, but it's so worth it. And I'm going to lay it all out for you, but take it step by step. It doesn't matter how quickly you cover this whole step. Just take it in bite-sized chunks and become comfortable in an area before you extend more. So the next step is to find ways to connect each one of your kids to reading. And within that step, the best starting point is mealtime reading. Good old read aloud time at lunch. So with all of our meals, most of our meals, we will have short read aloud time. I mean, it doesn't take kids long to eat a meal. So we're not talking about an hour here. Eventually, as our kids get older, I would like to extend that time, but it's mainly just while they're actually eating at this point, which equals 1 to 2 picture books. And that is what I aim for. I have a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And so I want books that are entertaining to all. So I choose picture books that keep the younger ones interested, but I do try to make them picture books that have a legit story that we're working through, because some picture books will be like 1 or 2 words per page, which is fine for the 2 and 3-year-old, but it's not really going to keep the older. And those can be the first books that you intentionally pick when you're at the library. And this is very brief window of read aloud time, but it's happening 2 to 3 times a day, because things come up at mealtime, so it doesn't necessarily happen every meal, but it's still very consistent, very repetitive, and a slow introduction into daily reading aloud. And that will be on some level connecting with reading with all of your children, all in one step. So the next one I would tackle would be your eldest children. Now, if you only have one child, I mean, obviously not all of these steps might be applicable, but I'm trying to cover, mainly speaking to young moms, and so trying to cover the age that your kids would most likely fall within, which are also the ages that my kids fall within. And so the older kids, if they are maybe young readers, they are learning how to read or about to learn how to read, you want to start working in that direction. You want to find books that will interest them, but reach kind of the top tier of their attention span. Maybe push them just a little bit. And that can be read alouds just for them. So for instance, my 6 and 7-year-old, we find young chapter books with maybe a handful of pictures in the whole chapter book. We're talking like Willy Wonka feel, where there's a few pictures, but it's mostly just a chapter book, but it's a very fun and inviting story to young minds. And that is transitioning them, trying to push them a little bit. They're used to picture books, and now we're transitioning them to chapter books, to sitting still longer, just listening without relying on the visual, using their imagination, just moving them to that next productive level. And so my husband reads a chapter book to them for about 45 minutes every evening. Well, again, not every evening, things come up, but most evenings, that is the goal. So you got your read alouds for your eldest, then you want the independent readers. So whether they are actually reading on their own or they're just starting to move into that, you want them to have books that they independently can pick out and can look at whenever they want. Because it's great for kids to learn to sit and listen to read aloud time. That's a game changer. But what's also, and maybe even more of a game changer, is for them to develop a love of reading on their own. For in their spare time, they choose books. When they're laying in bed and they're not ready to go to sleep yet, they're choosing to read books or look through books. When they wake up in the morning and they have downtime before it's time to come out of their room, instead of going and playing in the toy box, they choose to sit and look at or read books. So I have found the most success with that if I at least offer to let them choose their own books. And sometimes, again, just like you're developing the skill and the confidence to choose a host of books, they are too. So with all of my kids, I started off choosing books for them, kind of trying to take note of what interests them and what didn't, tweaking it as we went. But then eventually they took over. They kind of figured out their own taste based on what I was choosing, and they started picking their own books. And that is the goal. So they're picking them out. You can see where their interest is going. They're gaining excitement over the books they've picked out, and that makes them even more apt to go towards books in their free time. And then the third category for older children is educational. Now, for my older kids, this means books that they're going to read to me, which might overlap with books that they choose for themselves, may or may not, depending on their reading level. But it's books they're going to read to me to practice reading. And it's also books I'm going to read to them that have a direct educational point. It's a historical story or scientific knowledge or wherever we're wanting to go with reading that's just educational. And I usually read some of them during homeschool time. So we got for fun, read aloud, independent books, and educational. Them reading to you, you reading educational to them. So that's older kids. Then with younger kids, you have the same three categories, but just you're going to have to think of, again, I'm laying them out separately because if you do have older kids that are reading and then you have younger kids that are toddlers, covering these three categories cannot be done simultaneously. They're going to require different books. So the first is for fun, read aloud. For my 2 and 3-year-old, that's still picture books. And so it's kind of like the same type of books that we read, because again, they would be fine with the 1 to 2 words per page. But for the reading time, read aloud time that I'm reading to them for 30, 45 minutes, and I'm really trying to kind of push their attention span and their reading abilities or listening abilities, I guess, I'm going to be picking the ones with more legit stories that they can eventually learn to follow the story, and it's a little bit lengthier of a story, and it just really stretches their skills there. And I read those to them while my husband's reading the chapter book to the olders. So that's read aloud for fun. Then the second is independent books. Now, neither my 2 or 3-year-old are reading yet, but they do enjoy looking at books. And especially my 3-year-old has definitely figured out his taste in books. So I am still usually choosing books for my 2-year-old to look at. She hasn't really expressed an interest in doing that at the library. But my 3-year-old is a little bit of both. I pick out some, but he's learning to pick out some too, and has definitely developed his taste. And we have baskets set aside for their books as well, and they can look at them whenever they want. And then the third is educational. So this I don't do. I mean, they're 2 and 3. I don't do a lot of school time with them, but I do try to get some books that help us practice the basic knowledge that I'm trying to get them to catch on. So some alphabet books, number books, color books, shape books, animals and animal sound books, basic knowledge, names, types of words matched with pictures to help them learn the different names for things, seasons, just basic knowledge that they'll enjoy the book factor of it, but at the same time, I can kind of be testing their knowledge and getting them to practice these different things. So that's usually the extent of the educational book that I do for them. So each one of these sections of books has its own storage location, just to keep it organized. And I would encourage you to do the same. In our school closet, we have the picture books that we read during lunch. We also have the educational books for the older kids. We also have any books that they're going to be reading to me. And then in a separate shelf, I have the educational books for the youngers. It's mostly board books. Again, just walks through the basic facts. And then by each child's bed is a basket with the books that they've chosen that are just free time books. As long as it's matching our family's worldview, I do not limit the style, because the point of this is to get them to love reading and books independently. And whatever avenue that takes is perfectly fine. We can continue through chapter books and the lunchtime books and all that. We can continue to hone down their book tastes and expose them to more things. But the point of those books that they choose that are for independent book time is to give them the freedom and the feeling of ownership and just the love of reading. And then I've also created a cute little book nook that is very frequently used during the daytime. The baskets by the bed are often used before they go to sleep and when they wake up in the morning, and they'll grab those books and take them to the book nook sometimes, but during the daytime, they usually sit in the book nook chairs. And again, I will be making their lunch and they will finish picking up from the morning and they don't have anything that they need to get done at that moment. I will often find 3 or 4 of them just sitting in there looking/reading books. And as you can probably see with all of these different categories, now that I've actually broken down what this 150 to 200 books are, it's pretty easy to get there, especially if you have several kids and they each have the different book needs. And this might sound complicated, but literally we go to the library at least once a week, sometimes twice. And all that looks like is I glance through the school shelf. I see if I need to get any more picture books for lunch or educational books. And then I go tell my 2 oldest, do you need any more books? Bring me any books that you're done looking at. We'll put them in the basket to take back. And do you need any more? And if they do, all right, when we get there, you can pick them out. And I will replenish the lunchtime and educational sections if they need it. We get back home, divvy them up. We're good to go for another week. It will become second nature. It will become just part of your normal routine. All right, now before I go, I just want to give you a couple resources to continue the research, to continue honing this down and giving you more confidence and the sense of control over what can be an overwhelming portion of your life. So the first resource is Read Aloud Revival, and this is a resource that I've learned a lot from. There's a book connected to it that I've read. There's a podcast that I've listened to. And then there is a membership to the page with reading lists and suggestions and just really wrapping your mind around the whole concept of the beauty of reading and how to help your kids get in that mindset. Just a lot of valuable information. And then the second resource, which I believe is another aspect of this that can be a challenge, is all the read aloud time I just said we do. And even just going on regular trips to the library and feeling like your home is orderly enough to take all of these different book sections and not get chaotic. That takes a level of home management and organization that can be very intimidating to a lot of us, to calm our schedules down enough that we have the opportunity for these amazing outings, to calm down the order of our home enough that we can take these organizational tactics and not get overwhelmed by them, and to bring our kids on board as team players in our home so that when we start involving them in these fun things like reading, they're going to be more apt to listen and respect and get more excited about them because they have more respect for us and they're because they feel like they're part of the team. So more on that avenue of this, I would suggest as a resource, Moms Find Home Management. It is a membership that I've released and I would like to give you free access to it today. So there's links for that below. Now, the last thing I want to direct you to is what to watch next. And it's a video that should be popping up on the screen. And it is more of the overarching video on teaching your children a love for reading. This was mainly zoning in on the library, but there's obviously more to it than that. And so I would like to direct you there. I not only hit some other points that you can cover in your life to direct your children to a love of reading, but also I walk you through a day in our life, reader edition. So it really shows you how we take reading in bite-sized chunks and work it in throughout our entire day. And remember, I'm always here if you need me. Bye.